This story is about a high school kid who gets hit by a truck and wakes up in a magical world, but he doesn't know that he has a special secret: he can't die. Our story starts in a world that looks like a long, long time ago. A boy named Rio is lying down in a small, empty house. There's no furniture inside, just 2 books and a knife on a table. Rio gets up, doesn't look at the things on the table, and goes outside to get some fresh air. He looks around and sees only tall mountains. He looks at his hands and says the magic words, "Water, come forth." A little bit of water appears in his hand and splashes. It all started a few days ago when Rio suddenly found himself in a white, empty place. He was wondering where he was when an angel appeared. The angel read his thoughts and told him that this place was not where you go after you die. The angel was very happy to have a visitor after so many years, but he was also sad because Rio had just died in his old world after being hit by a truck. Rio already knew that. He also figured out that he was going to be born again in a new world. So, he asked the angel, who he decided to call Angel Michael, what he should do in his next life. Michael told him to live however he wanted to. Rio had always wanted to live a slow and boring life, and after Michael said it was okay, he got ready to be sent to a new world full of magic called Phi. Before he let Rio go, Michael told him more about the world of Phi. He said that only a few people in the world knew how to use magic. In Rio's case, he could also use magic and was best at using water magic since he wanted a slow, boring life. Michael sent him to a forest to live alone in a small house. Michael had already put enough food for 2 months in a small ice house. Inside the house, he had also left 2 books that could help Rio learn about the world and how to use magic. It was only after reading the book that Rio learned how to make a little bit of water appear out of nowhere. For now, he didn't have to worry about being hurt by the monsters in the forest because Michael had put a magic shield around the house. Rio practiced his water magic again and was able to make a water ball just by thinking about it. He found out that he no longer needed to say the magic words out loud. This was very helpful for our main character. Using his magic, Rio then filled a bathtub with fresh water. But it felt a little gross to him because the water was technically coming from his own body. The water in the bathtub was very cold, so now he had to find a way to make it hot. He got ready to make a fire using the oldest, slowest way a person can. After trying many times and failing to make a spark, he gave up and wondered if there was a way to do it with magic. Using what he learned about science in his old life, Rio separated the parts of water, which made it turn into ice. Now that he had ice, he used it like a magnifying glass to focus the sun's rays and was able to start a fire. With that fire, Rio finally had hot water and took a long, relaxing bath. His mind became clear, and he realized that he could just make hot water with magic by doing the opposite of what he did to make ice. But that was for later. For now, he went to eat dinner. While he was eating, he realized he would have to start hunting for food soon because his food supply would run out. But he was nervous because if he went into the forest, he would surely meet monsters. He didn't think he could beat them with the small knife Michael left him. This meant he would now have to learn how to use magic to fight. The next day, Rio worked on his first fighting spell, Water Ball. But it didn't do any damage to the tree he was aiming at, so he changed the spell, making the ball as small as an arrow. After practicing for hours, he finally learned how to do the water jet spell, but it still didn't do any damage to the tree. The next day, he worked on making his ice magic better since his water magic wasn't working well for fighting. He carefully made an ice crystal but couldn't make it float because making ice move is not as easy as making water move. Still, after practicing for many hours, Rio was able to make several ice crystals at once, but he still couldn't shoot them at the tree. After many days of trying and failing, he became good enough to at least make ice crystals in an instant, but he still didn't have enough power to use them as weapons. But because time was running out, Rio found a way around it. He used an ice crystal as a spearhead and went into the forest. Near a river, he found some quartz and was happy because he could now use it to make a fire if he ran out of magic power. He then went to collect some healing plants when a monster called a lesser boar saw him and thought he would be an easy meal. The boar ran straight at him, but out of fear, Rio couldn't move his feet. It almost ended his new life right then and there. But at the very last second, the thought of dying again helped him jump away. This time, he used magic to his advantage. He made the ground slippery by turning it into ice, which made the boar slip. He then quickly made several sharp ice spikes appear in front of the boar, and the boar ran into them and was killed. It's like the saying, when you're in a tough spot, you do what you have to do, because he was able to use his water magic when he was in danger. Well, it was a great try, but he was still not very good at it. He went home and immediately started reading about monsters in a monster book. It didn't take him long to realize that lesser boars were the weakest of all monsters. He took his time to read through the book to learn about other creatures he might meet, because maybe his slow life wasn't actually slow. He read the page that talked about dragons. All the book could tell him was that when he saw a dragon, he should run. It wasn't like he could outrun it. He would still die, but he should still try to run. He flipped to the next page that talked about a monster called an Akuma. For this monster, he didn't even have to run, he just had to pray he didn't meet it. The book didn't seem to help him much, but he kept reading. You would think he would be scared after his last hunting trip, but a boy can't stay inside forever. So the next day, he got ready and went outside again. The day started well as he found a tree with fruits. When he took the first bite, it really made up for all the stress he went through the day before. It tasted so good. Well, it brought him another kind of stress as a monster called an assassin hawk flew toward him and knocked him down. He saw that the hawk was stronger than he was, and there was no way he could beat it. The hawk used air magic that was invisible, so there was no way he could fight back. He remembered the idea from the book and ran, but how could he outrun a bird? Seeing he was trapped, he stopped to fight. He used his ice magic to trap the hawk. When he thought the hawk was dead, he went closer to it, but the hawk broke through the ice, though one of its eyes was hurt. When the hawk realized he was stronger than before, it ran off. He sighed in relief and fell to the ground, complaining that the slow life he asked for wasn't actually slow. He tried to find his way back home, but realized he was lost after running from the hawk. As he was walking through the forest, he saw something that scared him. A Dullahan. It had no head, and smoke was coming from its neck. The Dullahan was taking care of its horse. One way or another, he found his way back home. As time went on, he trained to get better. From fighting several monsters to fishing, he got so good at his ice magic that his ice could now cut through a mountain. He kept trying to get stronger, and at this point, he was getting used to his new life. But every night, he went back to the place where he found the Dullahan to fight it. Not because he wanted to win, but maybe because it made him stronger. He didn't know much about Dullahans because there was nothing about them in the monster book he was reading. So it was either the Dullahan wasn't a monster or it wasn't in the beginner's book. After another failed fight, he admitted that the only reason he kept coming back was because he felt the Dullahan wanted to make him stronger. He watched as the Dullahan made an ice sword. The Dullahan held the sword toward him, and he understood that it wanted him to have it. After he took the sword, the creature left peacefully. The next few days, or maybe weeks, were calm for Rio. Well, until he met the angry hawk again. On that day, he was training as usual when he saw the hawk in front of him. He noticed it was missing an eye, so he immediately knew it was the same one he fought before. But the hawk wasn't black before, but now it was. It also looked bigger, which meant it had gotten stronger. The hawk came at him with so much strength that Rio made a 5-layer ice wall, but the hawk broke through it easily. He made a 10-layer wall, and the hawk broke that too. When he used his ice lancer, the hawk flew right through it to attack him. The stick he was using for support fell, and in the heat of the moment, he picked up the sword he got from the Dullahan and attacked the hawk. The sword worked. The hawk fell back, then came at him again with full force, but he used the sword to stab it, and it fell. He walked up to the hawk and said that the creature was very determined. Well, he had taken its eye again, and he knew the hawk wanted to fight back. But for him, fighting the hawk had made him stronger, so he had the hawk to thank for that. He also admitted that the hawk got stronger just to fight him, so he gave it a moment of honor by letting it die by his hand. He took out his sword, and the hawk died. He continued his journey, not knowing that a dragon was nearby. The dragon came up to him and spoke. He was shocked that he could hear a dragon's voice. The dragon was also happy that he could use his mind-talking power again. He asked Rio if he had seen a stronger hawk, and Rio said he had killed it. The dragon wondered how Rio could have the power to do that. So Rio showed him the sword. The dragon recognized it as the sword of the Fairy King and asked what Rio did to the Fairy King to get such a gift. But Rio didn't know either. Since the dragon was done with his questions for Rio, Rio also asked him a few questions. They talked until it was late before the dragon said he had to leave. Before leaving, Rio introduced himself, and the dragon said his name was Lewin. Rio was having a really great time in his new life. So much so that the angel who sent him there checked his records again and realized he missed something important. Rio had a secret feature in this new world that the angel didn't notice because the last person he sent there didn't have the same power. It was the power of staying young forever. How would Rio use this power? What did this mean for him? By the river, a strange boy with red hair was lying on the sand. Who was he? One early morning, Rio was hunting by the seashore to get some seafood. He found a shipwreck which made him feel like he was in a storybook. He saw a man's body next to the boat, and after checking his pulse, realized that the man was gone from this world for good. Rio then saw another man named Abel on the other side of the wrecked boat. Luckily, this guy was alive and breathing. A little bit of backstory. Abel and a few other people were on a journey in this boat when a crazy thunderstorm started out of nowhere. In the middle of the storm, a giant octopus attacked their boat, which made everyone drown as the boat broke in half. Luckily, the accident happened nearby, and that's how they washed up on the shore here. Now, Rio has brought Abel, who is still unconscious, to his house and goes out to do some chores. In the meantime, Abel wakes up and wonders where he is. He walks out of the house to find a beautiful flower garden and a stone path in the middle leading to the forest, all made by Rio. Rio shows up and says he is happy to see that Abel is okay, even though he doesn't know who this guy is. Abel, on the other hand, is shocked because he didn't feel Rio's presence at all. Does this mean Rio has a special skill that lets him sense his surroundings? In any case, what bothers Abel the most is Rio's living in the wild style. He wants to ask Rio if he's a person from the countryside who doesn't have any clothes, but then he stops himself because he doesn't want to leave a bad impression on their first meeting. So he politely introduces himself, thanks Rio, and assumes that Rio saved his life. Rio, in reply, says that he doesn't deserve any praise because the only thing he did was carry him to his home. That said, Rio becomes serious and tells him the bad news that all the others have passed away. Abel tells Rio not to feel bad for them, revealing that everyone else on his boat were smugglers. As he is about to go into detail, his stomach growls, so Rio suggests they continue this conversation while having lunch together. Now that they know each other, Abel asks Rio if he has any clothes. Rio casually explains that he can't make any because he doesn't have the materials like thread or cloth needed to do so. Abel, in response, argues that Rio can just go buy some clothes from any nearby town, but then he instantly realizes that Rio must not have any money with him since he is living the life of a holy man in exile. Abel, of course, doesn't know where they are and is only assuming there are towns nearby. So Rio explains the situation to him, telling him that there aren't any towns nearby and that's why he has been forced to live like this. Abel asks Rio how he manages to get food and other things, and is very surprised when Rio reveals that he is a water magician. Abel is impressed because from what he knows, only half the people in the central province know how to use magic. This upsets Rio because he thought he was a bit more special since the angel Michael told him that only a few people could do so. In any case, Abel wants to check something, so he asks Rio to bring him back to the shipwreck again. When they get to the coast, they surprisingly find no bodies there, and Rio assumes that the bodies were washed away by the sea or eaten by some monsters. This just means that if Rio hadn't saved Abel's life, Abel would have been eaten as well. So Abel owes it even more to Rio for saving his life and says that even though they are strangers, Rio is a true friend. Anyway, Abel searches the shipwreck but fails to find what he was looking for. So he changes his plans and decides to meet up with his friends at a town called Lun, which he thinks is to their north. He invites Rio to join him on his journey, saying he needs a guide since he doesn't know where Lun is. Rio has no idea himself but still agrees to be Abel's guide and says that they can start their journey tomorrow as he needs some time to prepare. Abel accepts and they shake hands on this deal. Later in the evening, Rio says goodbye to his farm life and then goes into the forest to also say goodbye to the Dullahan, the magical creature that trained him. Rio tells the Dullahan about his plans to leave tomorrow but promises that one day he will come back. He says how thankful he is to the Dullahan for all the things he has done for him and decides to practice fighting one last time with his teacher. They go all out, and after a long intense battle, the Dullahan is not surprisingly the one standing. Now that it is time to leave, the Dullahan gives Rio a farewell gift, a proper main character outfit for this homeless loser. The next morning, Rio, now in his new outfit, starts his journey with Abel to the north, leaving behind his life alone in the medieval world. On their way, they meet a wild boar and Abel steps up to deal with the situation. Although he can't use magic, he uses a sword skill to move faster and stabs the boar, killing it with a single hit. The forest seems to go on forever, and they have to set up camp that night under a large tree. They continue their journey the next morning and arrive near a pond where they see a lizard man couple having a private moment in the water far away. Abel doesn't want to pick a fight with them, saying that lizard men are quite strong, so they take a different path to the left. But Rio, using his sensing skill, feels some creatures running toward them and thinks that the lizard men may have noticed them. Abel tells Rio to stay behind him, but Rio refuses as he senses many enemies coming. Abel doesn't think Rio's magic will be of any use without a magic staff, but to Abel's surprise, Rio doesn't need one. He doesn't even need to say any spells. In an instant, he makes several ice crystals appear and shoots them at 4 approaching lizard men, taking them all out immediately. Within a few seconds, the entire fight, which the proud Abel couldn't end, ends easily. After Rio finishes defeating the monsters, Abel asks him what he just used because he has never seen that before. Rio doesn't think it is that special. All he used was a water lancer. He tells Abel it isn't special, but Abel feels differently, especially because he saw that Rio had made 4 lancers at the same time, which is different from what he knew, that mages can only make one magic at a time. He tells Rio he is worried, and Rio indeed says that he doesn't know that. He tries to change the conversation, but Abel insists that it works that way for the wind mages he knows. So Rio reminds him that he is a water mage. Before they continue their journey, Rio says some magic words and brings out water to drink. He reminds Abel that they are tired and they have a long day ahead, so they should drink water. Abel takes it, but he is still worried about something. The magic words that Rio had said to make the water appear are quite different from the ones he is used to, but Rio doesn't listen to him. They continue their journey, and as they get closer to Lun, Abel gives Rio a coin that can be spent at Lun. Rio is so excited that this is the first time he has held money since he got to that world. Seeing his excitement, Abel explains to him that there are several other kinds of money like that, and the money is from the kingdom of Nightly, a kingdom that Lun is a part of. He further tells him that there are 3 cities in that kingdom: Lun, Hondo Federation, and Duhi Empire. Immediately Abel mentions Duhi, Rio pauses, which makes him wonder if Rio had been to that city before. He asks Rio, who says no. Rio was surprised because of the name of the city. He feels the name doesn't sound good, and it wouldn't be good if he were a member of that city and had to introduce himself with that name. Good for him, because he is indeed not a member of that city. They continue their walk and make jokes about this. They walk past some rocks, and Abel notices that a rock is moving. He attacks the rock and Rio joins in, but he realizes that they have entered a rock golem nest. The rock keeps gathering itself, and Abel runs to stab it, but it grows back. Seeing that Abel's sword isn't doing anything, Rio makes a 10-layer ice rock and hits it on 2 of the rocks. It overpowers the rocks, so he proceeds to do the same for the other ones. When they get to the last one, he sees that the rock isn't moving. He realizes that it is because it is lying on its back. They get their power from the floor, and if they are lying on their back, they have no power. They also see a magic core under their feet, and Abel recognizes that the rocks must have killed several monsters, so the cores are great. They decide to take it as their reward, and Rio considers going to take from the other golems. But he notices that the golems are fighting the ice rocks. So they leave. They walk further and see another monster. Rio thinks it is just a frog, but Abel thinks it is a behemoth. Life doesn't even give them enough time to argue about what it really is, as they see several wyverns flying there too. They are in the middle of a war zone, but they are also lucky since the behemoth is also a victim in that fight. They are sure it won't let the wyverns defeat it. They turn out to be right, as the behemoth fights back with magic and wins. Rio is excited about the things he has seen so far. That night they set a fire, and they talk. Rio teases Abel that he had thought Abel would fight the behemoth too, and he would watch a round 2 of the fight. This boy is really wicked, but it is just a joke. They talk about the magic negation that the behemoth had used to fight, and Abel says he had only seen it as a trap in dungeons. The idea of a dungeon excites Rio, and when Abel notices, he asks him if he is interested in a dungeon, and he says yes. Well, he is so lucky because the only dungeon in the entire kingdom is at Lun, and that is the city they are going to. Rio teases that Abel had kept that a secret from him and didn't tell him from the beginning, but Abel insists that he didn't know Rio was interested in dungeons in the first place. When Rio insists on knowing the other things that Abel could be hiding from him, Abel asks him if he has seen dwarves and elves before, because he is indeed in luck. There are several dwarves at Lun, and they are quite strong. When he says this, Rio says he knows that already, and Abel wonders how he knew. He also says there is just an elf in Lun, and Rio insists he is familiar with that information too. They continue their journey into the mountain, and Rio tells Abel that after they cross that hill, they will find a human community. Abel doesn't expect Rio to know this information, so he asks Rio again. Rio remembers that it was the dragon that told him when they were talking, but he also knows there is no way he could explain that to Abel, and he would believe. So he tells Abel to forget about it. As they continue their journey, a high-grade monster threatens them. When Abel feels its presence, he prepares to fight. But when he sees the mighty monster in front of him, he gets so scared that he doesn't bother fighting, and has difficulty breathing. Luckily, Rio calls his attention and throws meat at the monster. After the bird swallows the meat, it leaves them. Abel sighs in joy that it is all over. He is glad that Rio could cover up for him. They continue their journey and wonder what is wrong with that area. The monsters they have seen there aren't monsters that humans should be fighting. There is something wrong in that hill. They remember that the wyverns had always flown from the north, so they assume that they are around the North Mountain. They peep towards the side of the hill and see several wyverns eating the body of another monster. They realize that they are right. Abel plans that they shouldn't fight, but Rio thinks otherwise. He thinks they should fight, and if they are fighting, it is best they fight now that the wyverns are on the ground. They go to fight and win, but they are confronted with several other wyverns flying towards them. Rio uses his magic to kill them from the sky. Abel goes for their gem. Abel is already excited about the fight, so when several other monsters come, he is so happy. By the time they are done with the fight, they look at themselves and smile. It is a great partnership. Let's see how the partnership will end. Rio and Abel continue their journey, talking about whether they should ever risk fighting wyverns again. While Rio doesn't mind fighting these big beasts, Abel doesn't want to face such danger. Still, he is glad that Rio did fight the wyverns earlier, as they now have a whole bag of magic stones that they can sell for a lot of money. Anyway, the two of them reach a place far to the north and see a thin road in the distance. This means they will find a town if they follow the road. Abel looks around, and since the road leads to what looks like a giant snowy mountain to the east, he thinks they should start walking west instead. Abel seems to recognize the icy mountains, but he doesn't tell Rio about it. He only tells him that if they follow the path east, they will reach a town named Coyote. Rio is happy to hear this and says how much he has been wanting to sleep in a real bed. Abel is surprised to hear that Rio is a relaxer type guy, as he thought of Rio as a wild man who only wants to fight monsters. In any case, Abel starts telling Rio what he should do once they get to Coyote. He tells him about the local food, which he says is very tasty. It doesn't take the two friends long to reach the town. Once they do, they go to a local restaurant for food. There, Abel tells Rio about adventure guilds and advises him to sign up as an adventurer since he is quite strong. According to Abel, the guild card also works as an ID card, and with it, Rio will get to go anywhere in this nation for free. Rio likes the idea because when they entered the town this time, Abel had to pay the guards a silver coin for him at the gate so he could enter. Abel also tells Rio another good thing about joining the Adventurers Guild, which is that he can sell magic stones and things he gets from monsters, but he also says that he would have to be an alchemist to use those items. Rio, who loves science, is very interested in alchemy, so he starts thinking about becoming an adventurer. The waitress serves them curry and rice, and Rio is honestly surprised that this world also has the same kinds of food from his old world. He whispers to himself how in other stories about people going to new worlds, the main character has to go through a lot before they can make food from their home world. Since food like curry already exists here in the world of Fi, Rio thinks this is a total blessing. In any case, he starts eating and eats a lot, asking for more and more. The next morning, he once again says how much he loved the curry, making Abel wonder if this wild man has ever eaten good food before. Since Abel didn't say anything about the town having curry, Rio jokes that Abel is probably keeping more juicy secrets from him. This makes Abel act nervous, hinting that he is probably keeping some secret from Rio. The two begin their journey again through fields and farmlands, and soon find themselves near their destination, the town of Lun. As they reach the entrance gate of the town, the gate guard recognizes Abel and is shocked to see him because there had been news that he was missing. Abel doesn't have time to explain the situation, but just tells the guard that the man with him saved his life. The guard thanks Rio for saving Abel and very happily shakes Rio's hand. Since Rio hasn't signed up as an adventurer yet, he needs to pay to get in, and Abel once again pays for him, giving the guard a silver coin. The guard once again welcomes Abel back to town and asks him what he plans to do now. As they talk, Rio realizes that Abel must be pretty famous and very friendly with everyone here. Anyway, Abel and Rio go to the Adventurers Guild first. On their way, Abel tells Rio that normally when a person signs up, their rank starts from rank F, but since Abel is a very experienced adventurer, he thinks he can tell them how good Rio is. With that, Rio can start from E or even D. The same ranking rules apply in this world, which means that the higher a person's rank is, the harder the quest they can take. Abel doesn't think Rio will ever need to do any quests, as he believes Rio will have a lot of money once he sells all the magic stones they have. They have so much that selling all of them at once might crash the market. So Abel wants to talk to the guild master first and let him figure out what to do. They enter the guild, and immediately everyone in there is shocked and very happy to see that their friend Abel is alive and well. As dozens of people surround Abel, Rio smiles as he never expected to have made such a popular friend. He goes outside, not wanting to get in anyone's way, and decides to take a walk. He runs into an elf girl who is interested in his outfit, recognizing it as the Fairy King's outfit. Rio is confused because he has no idea who the Fairy King is. Unfortunately, the elf girl says she is in a hurry, so she leaves without explaining, hoping they will meet again soon. Abel comes out looking for Rio and brings him inside, introducing him to everyone as the man who saved his life. He then pushes Rio forward, and everyone says how happy and thankful they are to him. After everyone goes back to their own business, Abel brings Rio to the guild receptionist to sign up. He vouches for Rio, asking the receptionist to sign him up as a D-rank adventurer. The receptionist can't believe a man like Abel, who is from the Crimson Sword Party, is personally vouching for someone. She says that this is the first time anyone from this party is doing such a thing, and that means Rio must be someone really special. The receptionist agrees, but says that there is still a physical test that Rio must go through too. Speaking of which, Abel wants to speak with the guild master. So the receptionist brings them to the meeting room, where Hugh, the guild master, rushes in when he hears that Abel has returned. The fact that they could pass through that mountain and return alive is shocking even for Hugh, who is the guild master. Abel asks Hugh if that fact is enough for him to rank Rio up, since he knows that there is no way a person without skills can do that. Hugh admits that he is right and agrees to rank Rio up. Before they could finish their conversation, a team rushes into the room. The team has members of Abel's party, Lynn, Warren, and Rhea. When Lynn sees Abel and confirms that he is alive, she falls to her knees. She can't imagine that she would see him again. He stands up and goes to meet them and apologizes for making them worry. He admits that he would have died if Rio hadn't saved him, so Rio is who they should be thanking. Hugh knows that the party has a lot to catch up on, so he excuses them and asks the guild clerk, Nena, to prepare the materials needed for registration while he lets the party use the room to catch up. Rio tries to leave with Hugh, but Abel calls him back, telling him they have something to do together and telling him to wait by the guild after his registration. As Rio walks away, Hugh reads his mind and sees that he is confused about how popular Abel is. He explains that Abel's party, the Crimson Sword, is the strongest party in the village, and everyone felt Abel's absence. Rio asks if he will be registered as a D rank, and Hugh says yes. He admits that he knows Abel is strong, but he also knows that Abel wouldn't have been able to beat those monsters if he didn't have a good support system. So he is very sure that Rio is very good too, which means he has no problem with registering him as a D rank. He takes him into another office, and Nena comes there with the materials. He leaves Nena to deal with the registration while he does the paperwork for the guild. Nena introduces herself and brings a book. She asks important questions like Rio's skills and level, and also asks if he had been to a dungeon before. When he says no, she tells him they have dungeon classes every month and asks if he wants to sign up. He decides to sign up, and she tells him about their next class at 9 a.m. in a few days. He is shocked that there is time there, and she tells him there is a clock in the middle of the city. Since he has no place to stay, she tells him he could stay at the guild's lodge for 300 days after his registration. After her paperwork is done, she brings his card and asks him to put his palm on a system. The system prints on his card, and the process is finished. They leave the room, and Hugh is glad that Abel is back. He complains about how the whole city had been a mess because Abel was gone. Rio returns to Abel, who takes him around. Abel tells him they are going to get the money for the stones they sold, and he also plans to buy clothes and a staff for Rio. Rio is thankful for his kind gesture but wonders why Abel wants to buy him a staff. Abel says a magician should use a staff, but Rio insists he is fine without it. Also, that isn't a big concern since he always has a sword with him. Abel doesn't even think he has a sword, but he shows Abel the sword by his side. Abel sees it as just a knife because it is very small. He says that it is a sword and he can use it. His whole life is a shock to Abel, and he also has things he is confused about. He needs to ask Abel some questions. After shopping and a lot of questions, he finds out that that world also has 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, and 30 days in a month, just like Earth. With the curry he ate too, he can guess that someone from Earth had been sent there and changed the world. Abel comes to meet him, and he thanks Abel for the things he bought. Abel tells him that there is somewhere else they have to go, and as the guest of honor, he can't refuse. Abel takes him to his welcome party, and they have fun and drink all night. The next morning, he is tired. He takes a walk to his lodge with Nena, who says that he must have had a great evening. She talks about how Rhea, Abel's party member, didn't leave Rio's side at all, because she was so thankful for what Rio had done for them. That wasn't really what stressed Rio. He is stressed because he drank a lot the night before. They eventually arrive at the lodge, and Nena opens the door. The room already has 2 people, and Nena introduces Rio as their last roommate. The 2 roommates, Niels and Otto, introduce themselves, and Nena reminds Rio of his class the next day before she leaves. After she leaves, Niels talks about how pretty she is. Otto isn't interested in Niels' daydreams, so he goes to talk to Rio instead. They greet each other and plan to be casual during their stay. Nena knocks again and brings another roommate, Aeon. She looks young, and they ask for her age. She says she is 16, but her parents just died, so she had decided to earn a living by adventuring. Nena asks them to welcome her and tells Rio to come to the class with her the next day. Meanwhile, Abel tells his party what he had seen with Rio. How Rio had used magic without a staff, how he used ice to kill wyverns, and other things he did. She argues with facts that it could never be true because magic uses closeness and distance. But Abel insists that is exactly what he had seen. He even talks about how Rio had used ice blocks to kill wyverns, which Lynn thinks is impossible. Another party member, Rhea, says that there is only one legend that was that strong, and it was the Inferno Magician. They think of all they have heard about the Inferno Magician as just rumors since no one saw it. Another concern is that if Rio is that strong, then he could turn against them or support the Empire. But Abel reassures them that Rio can't support the Empire because Rio hates the name of the Duhi Empire. On the other hand, Rio laughs and jokes with his new roommates as he thinks about how much his life has changed. After a short period of learning, their class has finally ended. Rio is just excited that he is now allowed to go to the dungeon. That is indeed the first time he is hunting in a dungeon, and he feels good. Ayan, who sits right beside him, doesn't feel the same way. She is too scared to enter the dungeon and doesn't think they are ready for something like that. Rio calms her down, saying it isn't a lot and that he will enjoy it. But she still looks obviously scared. Their teacher asks if any student has a question, and Rio offers to ask one. He asks their teacher if it is possible to use a skill to disappear from the level of the dungeon that he has cleared to the ones that are not cleared. The teacher is impressed by the knowledge he has and says that although it is something that works in other dungeons, in their dungeon the skill is not available to be used. But the teacher compliments him, and Ayan also figures that he is very strong. She turns to Rio and asks how he had learned all of that, but he reassures her that it isn't an issue and that he will learn it over time. To finish their class, they are going to clear the dungeon. Their teacher tells them that he will take them into the dungeon, and he takes them there. By the time they reach the gate, he shows them that their dungeon is in the middle of the town. Their whole town revolves around the dungeon, so anything that happens in the dungeon and gets worse will put the city in trouble. As a result, the dungeon has double gates to make sure that when there is a problem, the people are safe. Also, there is a yearly period called the Great Tidal Bore, where there are plenty of monsters, and the fight in the dungeon becomes intense. The monsters can explode, so the gate protects the city. Rio is shocked that things can get to that level, but Ayan is scared because she doesn't know that they can be attacked at any time. The teacher realizes that she is scared and tells her that she doesn't have to be scared because there is still a long time to go. The teacher also shows them that there is a secretary at the front of the guild where everyone who enters must write their name and the time they enter. But since they came from the guild, they do not have to sign up. They go into the guild, and their teacher tells them that the first stage of the dungeon has been cleared so they can enjoy walking around, but must be very careful and stay close so they won't get hurt. Ayan holds on to Rio throughout the trip. They get to a place, and Rio sees it is very dark. It means there is something there. He calls Ayan's attention to it, and they prepare for it. By the time the monster comes, it's a soldier ant. Rio uses his ice to hold the soldier ant down and tells Ayan to use her sword. He goes closer to fight. Since the ant has been held down, she hits it with her sword, and the ant dies. Rio is glad she could do that, but he doesn't think it is a big deal since Rio was the one who held it down. Rio goes closer and tells Ayan they should take the crystal and get paid for it. Ayan isn't too informed about adventuring, so she doesn't know they can do that. And Rio reminds her that they are adventurers and the job is meant to pay their fees, so they should do that. They leave the dungeon feeling excited about what they have done that day. Their roommates, Niels and Otto, meet them at the guild to celebrate with them for their achievement, and they have a great time. Well, not drinking alcohol, since alcohol isn't allowed in the guild. They discuss why alcohol isn't allowed. Niels compliments the duo for getting a crystal on their first adventure, but Ayan throws the compliment away, reminding herself that it wasn't her work, but Rio's powers. Rio reminds her of her hit too. Ayan says she wants to return to the dungeon the next day and even go to the upper layer, but she is scared of going there alone. Luckily, Rio also has plans to be there the next day. He plans to visit the second layer, so he offers that they go together. As they talk, Rio expresses his concerns about meeting an ant on the first layer. According to what he learned in class, only bats are on that layer. Niels also says that he has been hearing rumors about ants coming to the second and first layers, and this to them is a cause for concern. Luckily, Abel arrives right in time to reassure them. He tells them that the reason is because ants can crawl, so they crawl themselves down, and there is no reason to be concerned. He teases them, and they laugh. Niels didn't know who Abel was at first until Rio talks. When he finds out who Abel is, he quickly stands up for a handshake, considering that Abel is his celebrity crush whom he had hoped to see for a long time. Abel tells them that the reason he is there is because he had just returned from an adventure and has to report. Before he could continue with them, his teammates who had been waiting for him around find their way there and remind him that they have to meet the guild master. Since he doesn't want to leave, Warren carries him on his neck and takes him away. Lynn spends her time staring at Rio so much that it bothers Rhea, who drags her and tells her they should leave too. On their way, she asks Lynn why she was staring that much, and Lynn reminds her of all they have heard about Rio, saying that if he is that strong, then she is interested. Abel reassures them that they will surely see him in action, and they don't have to be anxious. The next day, Aeon wakes up excited to fight. She runs out, but Rio calls her to be calm. They find their way to the dungeon, where they are having a great time fighting every monster that comes their way. Indeed, teamwork makes the dream work. But Aeon feels a shortage of breath. Rio offers to help her, so he stretches out his hands and helps her up. She sits down to rest. Rio, who is amazed by her sword work, asks her where she has learned how to fight. In an earlier conversation, she had told him that she learned from a school teacher. That skill is too great for someone who isn't an adventurer. Aeon reveals that her teacher, Kiro, was a sword master. He knew how to fight, and he was trained at an academy in the city. Rio wants to know more, so he inquires further and finds out that Kiro attended Hume School. He compliments the skills but reveals that it is a very energy-demanding one. But when Aeon fights more and gets better with it, she would be able to handle it better. A person doesn't just become a swordsman by fighting, but by consistency. They talk about Rio's skills too. Aeon knows Rio to be a mage, but she also knows Rio's sword skills are great. She wonders if Rio had a teacher, and Rio says yes, although he doesn't talk about the Fairy King. Concluding the sweet conversation, Rio tells Aeon about his trip with Abel and how Abel wakes up every morning to practice his sword skills. If Abel, despite how strong he is, practices every morning, then Aeon should hold consistency tight too. It is an insightful conversation, and after resting, they return home. The next day, Rio gets ready to leave, and his roommates wonder if he is going to the dungeon. He says no, as he has other things planned. He visits the library, and he is shocked at how big it looks. That is the first time he is seeing a library in that world, and it is good. The librarian takes him to the side with alchemy books, as that is his target. She advises that he starts with that so he can get things easier. Taking her advice, he picks 2 books and thinks of reading them. He goes outside to read and considers buying them instead so he could read at his convenient time. As he wonders how much it could be, he suddenly sees the moon covering the sun. As a normal person, he concludes that it is an eclipse of the sun, but that is something different. He feels a very bad omen, so he stands to know what is happening. Suddenly he sees a very great firepower. He didn't just see it, that firepower is coming right at him. The first thing he feels is fear, but he has to defend himself first. He puts up an ice wall to protect himself. The attacker is shocked that a human is found in the midst of that, but she doesn't feel bad because she will just kill the human. The attacker looks like a monster with horns, and when Rio looks at her, he assumes it is an Akuma. He has to escape, but there is no way he can escape, so he chooses to protect himself first. He builds a wall of ice to defend himself from the next fire, and propels himself with a burst of ice magic to escape. She shoots at him, but it hits his coat, and the coat protects him from the attack. The attacker is shocked that he could do that. When she looks at him, she sees his suit and recognizes that it is from the Fairy King. Regardless, she plans to kill him, so he brings out his sword to defend himself. For the next few minutes, a head-to-head fight occurs. The Akuma couldn't help but recognize that he is strong. She also recognizes that he has skills. She also notices that he is using a sword from the Fairy King, so she asks him who exactly he is that the Fairy King is this generous towards him. He attacks her back and throws ice lances at her. But she runs so fast, he notices that she has so much speed and she is using the wind to control her speed. She comes back at him and attacks him, but he escapes. He attacks her again. This time it is quite unexpected. She escapes and asks if that is the best he can do. Luckily for him, the moon is gradually leaving the sun. She builds a wall against him and defends herself, but one of his attacks reaches her and injures her face. Feeling like she had her guard down, he jumps to attack her, but he is shocked to see her fight right back. They clash in the air and she falls with him. Before she could fight back, he fights her again and buries her in the soil. She returns to the surface, and this time looking like a real demon. The moon has gradually left the sun, so she is out of time. She agrees that it was a very great fight and she wishes they could continue, but she is out of time. Well, he doesn't want to continue too. She tells him that what just happened was a solar eclipse, and she doesn't have power over it, but she is Leonore and she asks for his name too. He calls her Akuma, which makes her know he knows who she is. She hopes to fight him again, but he does not want it. She leaves him with comments that he would have to fight Akumas again, but she wishes she will be the one to kill him. The sun returns and she disappears. Rio is just glad that he survived. He is happy the coat has saved him, because if the coat wasn't there, a hole would have pierced his heart. He needs to get the book, so he goes to withdraw some money. After withdrawing, he is shocked at the amount of money in his account. He recalls that the guildmaster had earlier said that the crystals they brought had so much worth, but he didn't know it could be that expensive. He walks home happy that he won't have to work for money, at least for a while, but he is shocked that his roommates aren't in the room. He leaves to get his book but sees them through the window. He sees that some of their fellow adventurers have ambushed his colleagues and injured them. The leader of the group brags that he didn't need to warn them about fighting because monsters won't warn them before a fight too. As a result, Rio hits the boys from behind and reminds them he didn't need to warn them beforehand too. After a long day, he and his roommates go to wash up. His roommate, who is a priest, helps him heal his shoulder injury. But he is shocked that despite how deep the injury is, his bone isn't broken. They ask who he fought to get that kind of injury, but he doesn't want to tell them. He is just glad he survived, and he just hopes for better days. Rio's roommates are at the dungeon, and after a great struggle, they manage to defeat a goblin archer. Ado heals Aeon's injuries using the lesser heal spell, while Niels collects the loot from the goblin corpses. They are currently on the 5th layer of the dungeon, and it doesn't quite make sense to Ado why there is a goblin archer in such a beginner level. Sensing danger, Niels decides that they head back to the surface and split whatever loot they've got in 3 ways. Aeon doesn't want to leave though, having a lot of stamina left to fight, but Niels, whose idol Abel has told him strictly to put survival as his primary duty, has made this line his motto, and that's why he implores both Ado and Aeon that they head back. His plea was convincing enough, so they return, and on their way back, Aeon comments that if only Rio had come with them today, they would have been able to explore lower layers of this dungeon with ease. Rio, meanwhile, has gone out for some fresh air on the outskirts of the city. He can't help but keep thinking about his fight with the demon Akuma, Leonor. He can't believe how incredibly powerful Leonor's magic was, but he still thinks that in terms of the speed they both conjure magic, they are on an even footing. So the only thing he needs to work on to avoid losing the next time they battle is to focus on increasing his power and turn his weaknesses into strengths. He also needs to find a way to counter Leonor's movement speed, which she can boost tenfold using wind magic. Since Rio can't use wind magic, he feels a little bit jealous and wonders if he can move quicker using water magic. He has used his water jet spell previously while being underwater to increase his diving speed, but he doesn't know how it can be applied on land. He looks at his feet, remembering ice skating, and realizes that if he just turns the ground into ice, the surface would have no friction at all, and theoretically, if he then uses water jet, he can increase his movement speed. But as he gives it a go, it completely fails, making him give up on this completely. But not losing hope entirely, he decides to experiment on this technique later, and heads back to town, deciding to visit the library later to research more on Akumas and alchemy. Abel's teammate Lynn is currently at the library looking for something in the forbidden spellbook section. She's actually looking for any information that would help make sense of Abel's claim that Rio conjured a thick ice wall mid-air and spears of ice to pierce the wyvern's defenses, something that she believes is just impossible. I mean, she could just approach Rio and request him to show her his overpowered magic skills. But no, her ego won't let her do that because her master, whom she considers to be one of the greatest magicians, isn't capable of performing magic like Rio. She thinks Abel was just exaggerating. An elf lady named Sarah comes there, and she seems to be a regular at the library. She greets Lynn and asks her what she's doing there since she rarely ever comes to the library. Lynn replies that she only came here looking for some info but didn't find it. She wonders if she should ask Sarah about it, but then decides not to involve another person in a matter that might not even be true. So she changes the topic and asks Sarah when she returned to Lund. Apparently Sarah was away on a quest for the royal capital, and Sarah claims that she just returned. In any case, Sarah has an envoy waiting for her, so she takes her leave, and Lynn kind of looks disappointed that she didn't get to speak with Sarah more. Niels and Aeon return to the Adventurers Guild and come before the receptionist, Nena's desk. Niels, acting as nervous as ever, stutters to speak with a fine lady like Nena. So Ado takes the mic and informs Nena about the loot they've gotten. He shows her the big magic crystals that came from the goblin archers they defeated in the 5th layer. Nena finds that super unnatural because goblin archers have never been sighted in the 5th layer ever. Finding this matter concerning, Nena rushes to inform the guildmaster and thanks the rookie adventurers for bringing this matter to her attention. Hugh learns the news from her and states that goblin archers are only supposed to spawn below the 10th layer or so. He considers this a warning sign that something disastrous might happen soon. So he asks Nena if there are any B-rank parties in town who can tackle any bad situation in the near future. Nena reports that the Crimson Sword Party and the White Brigade Party are currently in town, and the latter returned 2 days ago from an excursion. Hearing this, Hugh asks Nena to summon both parties before him as he wants to discuss this matter with them. After Nena tells the Crimson Sword to come meet the guildmaster, Abel kind of hesitates to go after learning that the White Brigade Party will also be there. Although Abel has been acquainted with Phelps, the leader of White Brigade, he's still hesitant. Regardless, he heads to the Adventurers Guild along with his teammates. Upon entering the Guildmaster's office, they find that the White Brigade party has already arrived there. Phelps confidently asks Abel how he's doing, and Abel, in reply, feeling awkward, greets Phelps. Now that both parties are present, Hugh first thanks them for coming. Then he briefs them about the situation. Abel cannot believe that the goblin archers actually came to the 5th layer and asks Hugh if he is certain this is what happened. As Hugh says he's 100% sure this is the case, everyone understands, and Phelps asks what they should do now. Hugh tells them that he actually wants both of their parties to enter the dungeon immediately and look for signs of an early Great Tidal Boar calamity. The Great Tidal Boar is a term referring to an explosive growth in monster population. And because it's almost been a decade since the last time it happened, it is not too far-fetched to think that the next Great Tidal Boar is coming to hit their town of Lun. Rhea agrees that the unusual monster appearances could be an early sign of the Great Tidal Boar, so she agrees to go with Hugh's plan. Hugh, of course, is going to pay them for their efforts and gives them 100 gold coins in advance, promising them that once their task is completed, they will be given 200 more. Just to be on the same page, Abel once again asks Hugh if their task is only to verify whether the Great Tidal Boar is coming or not, and Hugh replies in the affirmative, telling them that once they have confirmation, they should return to the surface and inform everyone so that they can lock the dungeon gate temporarily and prepare for the battle by summoning all of the adventurers and the regional knights. Hugh apparently has already informed the lord of this town about this quest and his plans for his countermeasure actions. Since Hugh is making such big plans, Abel can't help but think that Hugh believes the boar has already begun. Hugh clarifies that he just wants to be prepared for the worst, and once again tells both parties to head to the dungeon first thing the next morning. Both the Crimson Sword and the White Brigade accept the quest and leave, more determined than ever. The next early morning, everyone wakes up in Rio's room and sees that Rio has already gotten ready to head out. Niels asks Rio where he's headed, and Rio explains that he's going to visit the library again. This time, the north-sided advanced section so that he can learn more about alchemy. According to Addo, only D-ranked adventurers can enter the northern section, so it's pretty convenient for Rio, the main character. Aeon mentions hearing some rumors that the northern section contains forbidden books, and that gets Rio excited because who doesn't want to learn things that they shouldn't? Unfortunately for Rio though, an adventurer must be at least B-ranked to read those books. Rio calls it a shame, but his roommates tell him not to feel bad because they're sure it won't take him any time at all to get promoted to B rank. In any case, Rio's determination motivates Niels to hit the dungeon again, and Ado and Aeon are willing to go with him as well for some adventuring. Rio leaves and heads to the library where he wanders about in the northern section, not knowing where the books that contain knowledge related to alchemists are. As he climbs up the stairs leading to the 2nd floor, he runs into Sarah and instantly becomes amazed by her beauty. Meanwhile, Abel's team and Phelps's team have arrived at the dungeon gate. Phelps has gathered 20 people for this mission, and most are C-ranked adventurers. Now that everyone's here, Hugh decides to open the dungeon gate, but Abel stops him, intuitively feeling that something bad is about to happen the moment they open the gate. So taking defensive measures, he instructs Lynn to use the wind spell probe to scan the 1st layer of the dungeon first. Lynn accordingly performs the spell and senses more than a few hundred monsters at the entrance. This means that the Great Tidal Boar has already begun, so Hugh tells everyone to fall back and inform the knights and the other adventurers to take action immediately. The dungeon gates close, and Neil's team, who just came to the guild, learns that monsters are surfacing due to the boar. As everyone must join to tackle this emergency situation, Neil's team heads to the dungeon's first wall as well. Rio, on the other hand, completely unaware, is still staring at Sarah like a baboon. Sarah recognizes Rio as she had run into him the day he came to this town. This time she properly introduces herself to him, and she asks him if he came here looking for something. Rio doesn't want to reveal that he had an encounter with an Akuma, so he tells her about the other thing he came here for, alchemy, and specifically something that might help him create a golem. Sarah guides Rio to the section where books related to golem craft are. On their way they talk, and Rio learns that Sarah is also an adventurer belonging to a party named Win, and it's quite sad that she is the only member in her party. Back at the dungeon gate, everything is completely locked down, and all of the adventurers have gathered at the first wall waiting for the monsters to break through the gate. Seconds later, the first wave of monsters breaks open and the archers immediately fire their arrows at them. Among the monsters are many goblin archers, and they manage to injure several adventurers. But the fight keeps going as Commander Neville arrives with his knights. Hugh realizes that there are just way too many monsters and the numbers weren't this high during the last boar. Even after a long dreaded battle, the number of monsters doesn't decrease. Hugh suspects that a boss goblin will enter the fight soon, and Niels sends Hugh's message to Abel to prepare his party to fight that goblin boss. Being F-ranked adventurers, Niels, Ado, and Aeon can't do much but help the other adventurers with delivery work. The sun almost sets, and most of the monsters are defeated. Hugh, feeling uneasy by the silence, realizes that the boss monster will come at any second now. So he commands both the White Brigade and the Crimson Sword to get ready. They come down in front of the gate and defeat the weaker monsters first to ensure they don't become an obstacle later. As predicted, a gigantic goblin general holding a long sword in his hand walks through the gate, and judging from his size, Abel figures that he is a goblin general. Phelps thinks that once they defeat this monster, the battle will be over. But as two more goblin generals show up, they realize that a goblin king is somewhere in the back who will come in the final wave. Abel and Phelps step up to fight two of the goblin generals, and Rhea and Shenna get ready to deal with the third one. But before they can defeat the generals, an air slash attack comes out of nowhere and slashes the generals in half. The air slash came from just a simple swing from the final boss, the Goblin King, and as he steps into the battlefield, the only competent adventurers who can take him on are Abel and Phelps. Abel uses his unique skill, Perfect Shadow, to sneak into range, then impales the Goblin King in his chest. But it isn't enough to finish the job. So, Lynn comes next, who was preparing a powerful spell all this time, and showers the monster with bullet rain, piercing his body from everywhere. With the Goblin King defeated, the battle is over, and the main character wasn't needed. But unbeknownst to everyone, something ominous still lurks inside the dungeon, and it is perhaps far more dangerous than the Goblin King. This is where our video comes to an end. Subscribe for more anime recaps.